Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for being with me for today's devotion from the book of First Thessalonians, chapter 3. Hope you're enjoying reading Thessalonians. I know I am. And in this chapter, Paul describes his love, his heart, if you will, for the believers back in Thessalonica. He had already left that place and moved down to Athens. And while he's in Athens, he's really concerned about them. They had faced opposition, persecution, and he just had them on his heart and mind. Are they still walking with Jesus? Has the opposition gotten the better of them? And so he sends Timothy back up to Thessalonica to check on them. Meanwhile, he makes his way to Corinth, which on this, his second missionary journey, will become his base of operations. He will spend 18 months in the city of Corinth, just to the west of Athens. And so we pick it up in chapter 3 at verse 1. He said, therefore, when we could endure it no longer. What was he talking about? I mean, suffering? No. We thought it best to be left behind at Athens alone, and we sent Timothy, our brother, and God's fellow worker in the gospel of Christ, to strengthen and encourage you as to your faith. He said, I just couldn't take it any longer, wondering how you're doing, wanting to help you, worried that maybe the persecution is getting the better of you. So I stayed here by myself, and I sent Timothy. Timothy, go back and check on them and encourage them. And in verse 3, so that no one would be disturbed by these afflictions, for you yourselves know that we have been destined for this. He didn't want to leave them on their own as younger Christians, so he sends Timothy to encourage them. And then in verse 5, for this reason, he says, when I could endure it no longer, I also sent to find out about your faith, for fear that the tempter might have tempted you and our labor would be in vain. So Paul here is very open with his concern for the spiritual faithfulness of the Thessalonians in the midst of their persecution. So that's why he sends Timothy back. And he's just laying that out. So I think you get a picture of Paul's heart. He cared about those people. Wanted them to be faithful to Jesus, wanted them to be strong in their faith, and he wanted to help them with that. Meanwhile, Timothy goes to Thessalonica, and Paul leaves Athens and makes his way to Corinth. Timothy finds out how they're doing, and after a while comes back to Greece and joins Paul in Corinth, and he brings a good report. Look at verses 6 and 7. But now that Timothy has come to us from you, so he's come back from Thessalonica, and he's joined us over here in Corinth, and has brought us good news of your faith and love. You're still loving Jesus, and you're being faithful. You love us, he says, and that you always think kindly of us, longing to see us just as we also long to see you. For this reason, brethren, in all our distress and affliction, we were comforted about you through your faith. Paul said, man, I was so encouraged when I got this great report from Timothy that you're still walking with Jesus, even though you're facing opposition and persecution. Now, all of that information also helps us date when Paul wrote First Thessalonians, and we can with pretty good certainty say it was somewhere around AD 50, maybe as early as 49, no later than 51. So less than 20 years after the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus, Paul is writing this letter, about 50 AD, give or take a few months, to the Thessalonians. And even the book of Acts, and remember, we're reading Acts, and we're on Paul's second missionary journey, and we stopped to go to these letters that he's writing to the churches that he started on that journey. And in Acts 17, we read about Paul being in Athens, and then in Acts 18, we read about Paul being in Corinth, which is the place he was at when he wrote this letter back to the Thessalonians. And in Acts 18:5, it says, when Silas and Timothy came down from Macedonia. So he mentions in Acts that they came down. They came because Macedonia, which is where Thessalonica was located, in Philippi, is north of Greece, north of Athens, and north of Corinth. And so they come down and join Paul in Corinth, which is where he's at in Acts 18. So when we put all that together, we can get a pretty good picture of Paul's travels, when things were happening, and so on. So that's how we know some of this stuff. Now, Paul did visit the Thessalonian believers again, very briefly, on his third missionary journey. Whether he ever saw them after that again, we don't know. There's no record of it. We just don't know. So that's just some notes, study notes about this chapter. Now, devotionally, what I want to say is this. I mentioned we see Paul's heart in this chapter. He was really burdened for the Thessalonians. But God was also doing a great work in Corinth. I mean, he stayed there for 18 years, and God established a great church. And I can almost sense Paul being tugged, okay, in two directions. He mentions here that he longed to see the Thessalonians just like they longed to see him, but God was doing something great in Corinth, and I can just feel Paul being torn, wanting to be in both places, wanting to help both people, but he can't be in two places at one time. We only have so much time. We only have so much energy. And it's a challenge sometimes when you have to make a decision. You have to make a choice between two things that are good, two things you care about, two opportunities that are both good opportunities. I mean, life doesn't work in such a way, and God doesn't work in such a way all the time that your choices are always between something good and something evil. Sometimes there's choices between two good opportunities, two good things. So what do you do? You know, there's needs in Thessalonica. There's needs in Corinth. What do you do? How do you make decisions? It's hard. So here's what I take away from what Paul did that might help you, help me. When we are faced with these situations, is you have to choose one. That's right. You have to choose one. Doesn't mean you totally ignore the other, but you choose one and you give yourself to it and you focus on it. And that's what Paul did. He chose Corinth and he stayed there for 18 months. Now, he didn't ignore Thessalonica because he sent Timothy and, up there to check on it. And Silas as well. Paul doesn't mention that in Thessalonians, but Luke does in Acts. So it was Timothy and Silas he sent up there. He wrote them these two letters, 1 Thessalonians and 2 Thessalonians. So he didn't ignore them, but he made a choice and he focused on and committed himself to Corinth. And sometimes that's just what you've got to do, is make a decision and go with it. No one can do everything. Hear me. No one can do everything. So you make choices and you trust God. And you do it with authenticity and faith, and you go forward. That's my learning, if you will, from Paul's experience here. Hope that helps you some way. I'll see you tomorrow as we look at 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 and wrap up this week. And I hope you're also praying about who you're going to invite to church this Sunday if you haven't already invited someone to come with you. God bless you. I'll see you tomorrow.